I'm joined now by charting man Dan from thechartguys.com. Dan, welcome back.
Good to see you. Glad to be back.
Yeah, great to see you too. Now, Dan, the cannabis market has been characterized by what we might classify as shenanigans lately. CannTrust has now been found to be producing cannabis in part of its facility that was not duly and properly licensed. We saw Bruce Linton leave Canopy Growth under terms other than his own, one might say. And so there's this dark clouds gathered here over the cannabis space, and certainly the summer doldrums aren't happening that. Tell me about what you see in the market.
Yeah, we've got a lull without a whole lot in terms of catalysts for good news. So anytime there's any kind of bearish news, it gets latched on and it just magnifies the fear narrative that's continuing to drive things at this point in time. So those two things right back to back are definitely not helping. And the fact that, CannTrust is now down, 22% yesterday, another 6 or 7% today. It just adds fear and uncertainty into a market that's already, or I should say a sector that already has uncertainty around it due to legality and as far as the U.S. goes, but just uncertainty. And it just highlights and says, well, your stock could drop 20% overnight, and it increases fear. So we have to wait for that emotional cycle to run through again, wait till we get back to some reasons for euphoria. And until that happens, it is really a bear's market at this point.
You bet. One of our guys here at the office made an interesting point. At what point does CannTrust become a buy again?
I have been flipping it. I love oversold bounces, so I bought it pre-market yesterday at $6.99 or whatever it was off the top of my head. I'm forgetting the actual number, but something 99. And I flipped it and sold it for just a few percent and going to look to do the same. So eventually what I try to do is put myself in a position where I make an entry, I sell half of it for a 2-3% bounce, and then I put my stop loss at break even, and that allows me some wiggle room. And once the actual bounce takes place, we will get, some decent follow through. A lot of people are comparing it to, APHA, and are we going to get a bounce that Aphria got when we had that fiasco? And it's not the same thing psychologically, in the sense that we had a bearish hit piece on Aphria, and there was a lot of discussion and a lot of uncertainty. How true is this? Are these facts? And there was an unknown and an uncertainty, whereas in this instance, it's known and certain. The company has come out and, talked about it, and that difference alone makes the bounce less significant, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And now Canopy Growth, we saw, the day Bruce was terminated, that it sort of put on what we'll call a brave face and rallied higher, but since has started to sell off. Do you think that the sell-off in Canopy is something that investors should entrench for, and it might continue to much lower levels? Or do you think that this is just weakness based on the uncertainty created by his termination?
This isn't only based on that. The daily chart has been clearly forming lower highs for 6-8 weeks at this point. And as long as that's the case, we're in a bearish downtrend of lower highs and lower lows. So while it certainly didn't help the bulls at all, and it brought us right back down to support, this isn't the reason we're seeing weakness in CGC. It was already there, and this is only magnifying it. But one point to note, as we're seeing with MTLO, which is Bruce's former company, which is running 400, 500%, Bruce has given some positive comments on the U.S. sector, and now this is something that I'm paying attention to. And a lot of traders, if there's any individual USMJ company that has Bruce attached to it in any way, that's an instant all in and ride that wave up for some quick gains.
Sure, you bet. So with the Martello Technologies, the MTLO, do you think that the market cap has essentially almost quadrupled since Bruce made some comments wearing that T-shirt? Do you think that that's sustainable in Martello, or is Martello now a bit of a short candidate?
I certainly would not be entering at this point, but I was also saying that down at 60, 50 cents. So I'm baffled as to the longevity that the move has had. A short squeeze and a little pop for 3 days, certainly understandable. But to see this continued movement through the weekend and into the following week, which is this week, very surprising. So I think a lot of people are just hoping that he has an extra time now to put into the company, and that, perhaps he's going to continue to grow it out there. But short play was fairly easy today off of the $1 psychological level, and we hit $1 and pulled real quick back to 88 cents. So that alone is a very solid trade. But I myself, I'm not touching it with the 10-foot pole.
Right. All right, great, Dan. Well, let's take a look at some of your charts now.
So to go over some of those charts that we were just discussing, CGC, we can see this big green candle was the gap down day for the bearish news about Bruce being fired. But before that, we can see the bulls were still struggling. We had an attempt at a daily trend change where we have our low, our high of the bounce, higher low, and we failed the higher high here. We pretty much set the double top and then dropped down to support again. So we continue to see this lower high pattern where every single bounce attempt is just giving us a lower high. Most recently, 41.07 is the most important resistance for me because that was our new, most recent lower high. That being said, the bulls are definitely trying to hold this support zone in the $38 range on CGC. We can see this now marks the fourth time we have bounced in the low $38 range. All that shows me is that the bulls are playing defense. I have to see that the bulls are going on offense for it to mean anything. And to do that, we have to break the lower high pattern. And I anticipate that we'll likely see just another lower high on this bounce under 41.07 as this daily chart continues to tighten into next week. So here's MTLO, the company associated with Bruce. And we can see the huge move up where we've run pretty much 400+%. And what I'm looking for now is a volume climax. And we can see the volume is continually climbing. And oftentimes a volume climax signals the top of an uptrend or the bottom of a downtrend. The reason is that's when we get the final push, the most amount of bull volume matched by the most amount of bear volume, pushing the price back down, not only with profit taking, but also shorts entering bearish. That's why we have a big volume spike when we see turnarounds. And we're currently in a scenario where we have a tightening range forming, and this little equilibrium is either going to break bearish by the end of the day and convincingly tell us our temporary top is set, and a bear break right now would be 90 cents, or it's going to break bullish into the end of the day over 96 and have us looking back up at that $1 psychological resistance level. So that's going to pretty much tell us whether our temporary top has very likely been set or not, and we'll see where that stands probably by the time this airs. TRST, so the bearish reaction to the bad news. And let's pull up, I've been charting CTST because it has extended hours trading, which is relevant when there's news like this. So we have our second gap down open in a row, and the bulls are still struggling. We have a weak bounce attempt on the hourly. This looks like an hourly bear flag, which could lead to lower lows. Essentially what we're going to be watching for with a weak close, we'll look for our third gap down open in a row. And a 3 gap down pattern is a bullish reversal pattern, which essentially tells us that the bears have overextended themselves to the downside. We've seen the last of the sellers exit, and all that's left is buyers. So if we get that third gap down open tomorrow, I personally will be looking to enter some positions. Again, like I said, for that bounce, where I will exit partial position at small profit, and then try and set my stop loss around break even and let the trade and bounce try and play out a little bit longer. Once we do hit a bottom, there should be a very easy 10 to 15% bounce, but there's no indication that that bottom has been hit just yet.
Thank you very much for joining me again, Dan. As usual, a pleasure.
Absolutely. See you next time.
You bet.